Good evening, everyone. It is Friday night. As I like to say, it's Friday. We're here with our very special community and with my very special buddy, Coach Carla, the transformation coach. And we are glad that you are here. My name is Ruth Presley, and I am just a part of this community, and I love being a part of it. The sign up behind me just shows a piece of what we do, which is we are part of the Juice Plus company. And for those who may not know, Juice Plus began in 1970. We were the company that started introduced smoke detectors in the US, and then we moved into air filtration and water filtration. And then in 1993, with a divine connection between Dr. Smokey Santillo, and the Juice Plus crew, Juice Plus was born. Juice Plus, very simply put, is real food, good food that has been dehydrated and put into capsules, makes it easy for us to take. But I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and allow her to drop some knowledge. Carla, drop it.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure always to be with my good friend, Ruthie, and all our other friends, including Rev Deb. Hi, Rev Deb. And for those of you that will be joining us later, we're always excited to have you here on Friday night. Well, today, I want to ask you a question. What if there was a cure for type 2 diabetes? Now, my name, Coach Carla Joy. I'm really glad that you joined us. But I want to I want to ask you to imagine being a 15 or 16-year-old and having to go up the hill and think of a country scene, even though this was a tropical island, think of a country scene where you go to a wooden house, not a shack, an actual house, a wooden house, and you're feeling very nervous because you're going there to help a relative with their insulin injections. Now, you have never done this before. And so the relative has to guide you through, show you what to do to give the insulin injections. And that was one of the earliest memories I have of my involvement in actually caring for patients with diabetes. But it didn't stop there. You see, I had relatives whose lives had been impacted by this disease. My own grandmother, my mother's mother, I'm told, passed away just weeks before I was born from complications of diabetes. And her son, I'm told, was a type 2 diabetes. And all of my life, I'd known him as having this very special disease where he had to take injections regularly. And then I learned, as I told you, about how to actually give these injections to one of my relatives who had experienced an amputation. So I knew that this was a devastating illness. Well, I was determined to learn and understand more about it, to the extent that I actually went to medical school with the hope of learning how to more effectively care for people who had diseases like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, from which many of my relatives had been suffering. But then one day, my goddaughter, who's now a doctor of physical therapy, introduced me to the documentary Forks Over Knives and to the work of Dr. Michael Greger, about whose lecture I'm going to be speaking tonight. But his lecture, Uprooting the Cause of Disease, reviewed the CDC's 15 most common causes of death. And he showed the research behind the fact of what he was saying, that it is possible to reduce the risk of, slow the progress of, and actually, in cases, reverse diseases like type 2 diabetes. Now, there were people in the documentary Forks Over Knives whose lives were radically changed during the filming of that series by making lifestyle changes. So I realized that there was a cure. They knew the cause, and because of that, they were able to reverse the condition. So I'm really glad that you're here, because here on Doctor's Orders, we talk about the research. We talk about what the preponderance of quality research says about sickness and disease. And I even have a 4-month coaching program where I help people make the transition from a life of fear and concern and sickness and disease, where they can actually turn their life around and have a hope of restoring their health. Why am I telling you this? Well, I want you to know that there is hope, but not only hope because I say so. Would it surprise you to know that there was a treatment and a cure for type 2 diabetes in the 1900s, the early 1900s? We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I want you to know that the information I'm sharing is not a replacement for a conversation with your medical professional. In fact, I would love you to share this information with them and make sure that you don't make any changes to your medication or to your routines without informing them and having a discussion with them about the implications of the choices that you'd like to make. Well, as I mentioned, back in the early 1900s, there was a treatment that was discovered. Dr. Carl von Norden had some diabetes patients who had GI issues. So, to help alleviate their GI distress, he gave them oatmeal. You heard me, oatmeal. And so, what he found was, instead of their blood sugar levels going higher and higher, they actually started to come down. And he published his results in 1903, but it met a lot of skepticism until the Dr. James um, B. Herrick, who was famous because he described what we now call sickle cell anemia. He was so well known and well respected that when he took the chance of trying to use the oatmeal cure on his patients, people began to pay attention. Dr. Michael Greger has a presentation on nutritionfacts.org. I love the way he does his presentations, and I recommend that you go and look up the oatmeal cure on nutritionfacts.org. Now, after a couple of weeks on the oatmeal cure, his patients started to get better. And he actually made a declaration by 1909 that no one, adult or child, with diabetes should avoid the oatmeal cure. Every child, every adult that has diagnosed with diabetes should be treated with oatmeal. And then Elliot Jocelyn, who had the first and largest diabetes clinic in the world, he actually described the oatmeal cure as magical. But the one thing they did realize was that this oatmeal cure worked. People's blood sugar dropped back into the normal range if they excluded animal products. They had been giving them eggs with their oatmeal, and they stopped giving them the eggs because they found that when the eggs, the animal protein, animal products were removed, they got better glucose control. So why why animal products, whether it's meat, dairy, or fish? There's not just an association. You can see that people who eat meat, dairy, and fish, they have a higher risk of becoming pre-diabetic and developing diabetes. But also, they've actually done the tests that show if you swap out 2 servings of animal products with oatmeal or some other plant-based meal, you can actually reduce the blood sugar readings and the hemoglobin A1C. So, what is it that's in the animal products that would cause this? It was believed that it was something called branch chain amino acids. Now, all proteins are like beads, like branched beads, and the individual beads on the chain are called amino acids. But there are 23 different ones, and there are some that have branched molecules. Some are straight and some are branched. But these branched chain amino acids tend to be more in animal products than in plant products. So they actually put it to the test. They gave a couple of vegans who had diabetes branched chain amino acids, and their insulin control and their glucose control went out of control, just like somebody who was normally eating animal products. So we now know that fat in the muscle tissue is the cause of something called insulin resistance. Think of it like having a key to a lock, but some little mischievous person came and put chewing gum in the lock. You have the right key, you have the lock, it's your door, but it won't work because there's chewing gum in the lock. Well, the fat in the muscle cells acts like chewing gum to the insulin. Insulin would be like your key. So when you eat a meal and your blood sugar level goes up because you're absorbing the glucose in its different forms from the food you ate, your blood sugar goes up. That triggers your liver and your pancreas, and they say, oh, we need insulin. And the pancreas releases the insulin. It sends out all of these keys. They go to the cell and they knock, time to unlock the door to let in the sugar, which is what your body needs to make its own special kind of energy. But because of the fat, the saturated fat that is stored in the muscle cells, the insulin is not working. And they've been able to show the greater the saturated fat in the muscles, the greater the insulin resistance. So it is directly proportional. And the more you reduce the fat in the cells, the less insulin resistance occurs. So the saturated fat has these branched chain amino acids. It could be coming from the food you're eating, if you're eating animal products, or it could be coming from the abdominal fat that you're carrying around from food you ate days, weeks, months, dare I say, years ago. But that saturated fat, it stimulates the fat uptake. The branched chain amino acids stimulate fat uptake into the muscles, and that increases the insulin resistance. Now, you've heard me talk about whole food plant-based eating before, so I guess it won't be a surprise to know that whole foods would, if you eat whole food plant-based, that you could expect reduced insulin resistance, reduced blood sugar spikes, and a reversal of diabetes. But why oats? Well, it's well known that the animal products contain fats, protein, and many animal products are highly processed. And we already have data, research of almost 100 years indicating that eating animal products, the more animal products you eat, the higher your risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes type 2. Now, even before insulin itself was discovered, they did tests and they found that by using even randomized double-blind placebo-controlled tests, when you eat whole grains, it lowers the blood sugar. In fact, it improves blood sugar control and lowers your cholesterol. researchers have asked the question, well, why? It appears that there are special fibers, beta glucan, which is a fermentable fiber that is found in oats and other grains, feed the gut microbiome, the bacteria that's in the gut. And that beta glucan acts as a prebiotic that feeds the bacteria, which are the probiotics, and that combination leads to postbiotics, short chain fatty acids. They reduce inflammation, they improve cardiovascular function, they reduce insulin resistance, and the research is ongoing for all of the good effects of giving prebiotic fibers to the probiotic bacteria so that they can make the postbiotics that help us improve. Now, you can get these fibers in oats and beans. So, they've even been able to look for markers, inflammatory markers in stool to determine who has diabetes or not. There's actually that kind of correlation. When you look at the fibers, the bacteria, and the postbiotics produced, and what's in the stool, you can actually determine who has diabetes. So, what happens even after 1 day of adding um, fiber rich compounds like oats or beans or combination, you get an improvement in the bacteria and an improvement in the postbiotics, things, the short chain fatty acids. You've heard of butyrate, propionate, valuate. And all of these work together to reduce your hemoglobin A1C and your insulin resistance by a quarter in just 1 month. And it also increases the diversity of bacteria. If you can increase the diversity of the bacteria, then it's even better. So why do adding oatmeal and peas and beans and other fiber-rich compounds, why do they work? Well, they don't contain any extra fat. They don't contain any animal protein. They contain a lot of fiber, and they don't contain any branched chain amino acids. So altogether, this these foods work in the body to reduce insulin resistance, which is at the heart of type 2 diabetes. But this was known in the 1900s. In fact, Dr. Greger tells an interesting story. He says that 1,000 years ago in Egypt, diabetes was described as the river Nile from between the thighs. In other words, they were describing the frequent copious urination that takes place as one of the telling signs of people who have type 2 diabetes. And what was their prescription? Back in 1,000 years ago in Egypt, the prescription was wheat, other grains, grapes, and honey. Now, if you said that to somebody today, they'd say, oh no, too much sugar. Well, that is exactly the prescription that was given. It saved lives and it allowed people to live a lot longer. Harold Hemsworth, who was able to differentiate. So 100 years later, Harold Helmsworth, who was able to distinguish between type 1 diabetes, where the pancreas does not function, it's an autoimmune disease, and the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, they are gradually destroyed by our own immune system, and type 2 diabetes, where the pancreas is functional, but the muscle cells get laden with fat and create insulin resistance. He was able to test, and this was before insulin was even discovered. He was able to test and showed that even just a few days of removing a high fat meal and replacing it with meals that were plant based, high in fiber, that it reduced the insulin spikes. Well, it reduced the blood sugar spikes because they weren't looking for insulin at the time. And that even if, and I'm even hesitating to tell you this, but even if after about 2 or 3 days of having oatmeal and other plant-based with no animal products, even after 2 or 3 days, that people may even go back on their fatty food diet, but their insulin control, their glucose control continued for several weeks. So I know that this is going to be a shock to many people. I guess I was a bit surprised too. I didn't realize the power of oatmeal, but I'm glad that we're learning something new today. That if you add oatmeal 2 or 3 servings a day, then you can actually allow your body to, number one, reduce the amount of animal products, reduce the amount of fatty foods, reduce the amount of the branched chain amino acids that are associated with ongoing insulin resistance. So, how much do you need and what kind of difference will it make? Every one of us is different, but according to Dr. Greger, if you just have 2 or 3 servings of glucose, um, he gave the story about adding um, the oatmeal to a person who is in the ICU. And he said that it actually brought down their insulin use. They were giving the person 200 units of insulin. And after a meal of oatmeal and vegetables, they they dropped the amount of their blood sugar dropped from 250 to 100, which is closer to normal range, but they were only using about 40 units of insulin compared to 200 units. So, what about those of us who are not in the ICU? We're outside. And someone asked the question, well, what kind of oatmeal? Well, of course, you try to get the type of oatmeal, the best that you can afford. So if you have access to oatmeal and you can afford organic versions, or you can afford the steel cut version, or if you can afford the ones that are um, less processed, that would be better. But whatever oatmeal you can get access to, just a couple of servings, 1 serving a day or 2 or 3 servings a week will start the process, especially if you cross over and switch out meals like chicken or fish or an animal based meal, and you swap one of those meals out every time you eat the oatmeal. And keep in mind, this is going to be beneficial because um, people who are taking insulin causes weight gain. It causes, and having to have higher and higher amounts of insulin results in increased risk of cancer and increased mortality. So 1 or 2 servings, 2 or 3 servings a week will help move you forward. Of course, even better than that would be eating whole food plant-based. So insulin would eating a couple bowls of oatmeal a week will be a jump start. But if you really want to see the biggest results, you want to start eating whole food plant based. We talk about this in our other presentations. That's where 90% of your calories come from fruits, vegetables, grains, peas, and beans. And there's no dairy products involved. It's high in fiber, low in fat because you're not adding fat. Water is your main drink. So if you did that, you would expect to have the best results. I know that most of us are very busy, and that's why we've partnered with the Juice Plus company, and we've seen the results in our own lives and in the lives of our friends and family. And in Ruth's picture that she showed you earlier, you can see some of the products. Okay, I don't know what I just did, but you can see some of the products that that are there. I will just remove mine. There you go. So at the Juice Plus company, we have 30 fruits, vegetables, and berries, 10 fruits, 10 vegetables, 10 berries that you can add to your eating plan. We also have the omegas. Many of us are trying to get the essential fatty acids from the fish, but fish don't make omegas. So we bypassed the fish and went straight to the algae. So that means you don't have to eat the toxins that are also stored in the fish. You can get the omegas from the algae and 4 other sources, plant sources of omegas. And you get a blend, omega 3, 5, 6, 7, and 9, the way they occur in nature. We also have the complete shake. So this is a plant-based protein shake, but it's not just protein. It's protein with other vegetables. It has probiotics as well in it, and that helps you feed your gut microbiome. It has the fiber, and so you feed the gut microbiome so that your body can produce the postbiotics that they need. We also have the chewable version of the fruits, vegetables, and berries. And we have a program where for each adult that gets started on this healthy living journey, a child can be sponsored from the ages of 4 to 25 so that they can get the fruits and vegetables for free. We have the Luminate, which is a combination of several herbs and ashwagandha and the coffee berries, and other compounds that help us stay focused, provide energy, and help us also stay calm. We have access to the Perform and the Tower Garden. And finally, we have the probiotics, the super biome, which is the probiotics, the lactobacillus and bifidobacillus that the glucans feed. And we also have 5 fibers in the superfood fiber mix so that you have the probiotics that can help and heal your gut, and you also have the fibers to feed them so that they can actually become implanted in your gut, and you can increase the gut diversity, which Dr. Greger in his lecture explained will also increase the results. So we're really excited that we got the opportunity to share this information with you. I am grateful that you were with us this evening. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you'll stay tuned after the end of the recording to ask us questions. Whoever invited you to view this recording, whether it's live or as a recording, they care about you and they want you to have the best results in your life. And they want you to know that there's hope. This is Coach Carla Joy saying, thank you for joining us. And remember what we say at the end of every presentation.
Eat
Eat
more fruit
more
or vegetables.
vegetables.
Eat more fruits and vegetables.
That's right. Because with each passing week, we have more evidence that this is going to bring you one step closer to your health goals. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.